Welcome to the Just Word Podcast. I'm Pat Bolland. The Just Word Podcast is brought to you by Justwealth, investing the way it should be, just for you. Our next guest has a history in blockchain, publishing, African development, and now Osamede Arhumnwunde, co-founder and CEO of GIGX Technologies, is taking on the financial sector. He'll join us to explain his latest way to move money around the world. Don't go away. Osamede, great to have you on the show.
Absolute pleasure to be here.
I looked through your CV, Osamede, to be honest. You've worked with the Canadian Armed Forces, the U.S. Air Force, the Manitoba Marketing Network, the University of Manitoba, numerous chambers of commerce across Canada, TEDx even, and the Nigerian National Petroleum Commission. And most recently, and this is where I found you, was Techstars Toronto. What are you up to now?
Yes, I mean, the vision or the dream has always been, how do we bridge the Western world with Africa? It's a lot of progress, a lot of development going on out there, but there's also a lot of things that can be learned from the Western side of things. And it's always been an idea and a vision to bridge that gap, to make it closer. So that was the idea behind the Africa development side of things. And now with our new project, GIGX Technologies, is how do we help the African immigrant, the African business who wants to do business globally, right? But they lack that infrastructure for payments, so cross-border payments. And again, this really started for me, I would say 17 years ago when I first got to Canada. So here's the thing. When you first get to a new country as an immigrant, you don't have buying power, right? So for me, 17 years ago, I arrived the shores of Canada, no bank account. Now, in order to open a bank account, the bank says you first have to get a bill payment or some sort of thing that shows who you are, but you're brand new. So then you first have to get your rental agreement in place, get your utility bill. You need all of those documents in order to actually get a bank account. That process could take anywhere from 3 weeks to a month. So this is a month where you have no buying power. Now you finally get the bank account. You probably want to do some work, you get a transfer in. The bank tells you, you know what, your bank account is pretty new. So whatever money comes in, we would have to hold a portion of it. All of a sudden, you're handicapped for another 3 to 4 weeks. So we are going from you having no buying power as much as sometimes 8 weeks. And in my opinion, in 2023, there has to be a better way. And there is a better way. So for us, ultimately, is giving that buying power, giving that financial autonomy, that true freedom of money for African and African businesses cross-border or cross-country. So think about it as a global wallet.
Wow, a borderless wallet. That is very cool. Okay, so first question is, if I'm a novice and I'm sitting in Africa or Canada for that matter, how easy is it to work?
So very easy. It's just think about it as any other app. You download the app on your phone, you put in your name, email, you do basic KYC, because like any other financial product, we need to know who you are. And that's pretty much it. You go through the KYC process. It could be your passport or driver's license. The whole idea is for us to identify who we're working with. But this whole process takes less than 5 minutes, and you can be verified on our platform. Now, once you're there on the platform, and again, I want you to think about it, it's just, we want it to be as simple as having an actual wallet that you have in your pocket. But this time is a digital wallet that gives you global presence, right? So all of a sudden now with this infrastructure, this wallet, you can now say, hey, you know what? I do some business in, say, Canada, and I want to be able to have Canadian dollars. You can literally fund with your local currency. So let's assume you're in a country like Nigeria, in a city like Lagos. You can fund your wallet with the local Naira, and then you could convert that Naira to a Canadian dollar position. So all of a sudden, even though you're in Nigeria, you have access now to Canadian dollars.
Okay, so are there costs associated?
Now, the costs are very minimal. Yes, there are costs, but the costs are very, very minimal. The average remittance cost today goes as high as 7%. We charge an average of 1%. So in terms of relativity, it's way cheaper than a typical transaction. If you were going to do a wire from Nigeria today to Canada, it will take you 3 days. It will cost as much as $35, if not even more, to do that transaction. Well, with a platform like ours, you could do that transaction in 30 minutes or less, and it will cost you less than 10% of the original cost that with traditional banking system. So not only is it faster, right, it's also cheaper.
Okay, but are there limits on the amount of money that you can send, or can you send millions of dollars?
So there are limits, and again, all the limits is pretty much set by a lot of the financial institutions that we're partnered with. But one of the basic things that determine that limit is the KYC. So the more information we know about you and your business, the more we can facilitate the transactions. Remember, as a financial product or technology platform, our job is not necessarily we want you to have freedom with your money, but at the same time, we want to make sure we know who you are and what the purpose of that money is. Once we have all this information, typically those limits are expandable.
Okay. But any clients that come into the website, you don't know them. I mean, sure, you can get their passport and you can get their information, but they don't know you. Do you have any financial backing? Do you have banks that are supporting this effort?
Yes, yes. So what happens is for every country, so now we are actually doing a Pan-African expansion. I am currently in Lusaka, Zambia. Before this, I was in Rwanda, Kigali. Before this, I was in Lagos, Nigeria. Before that, I was in Toronto, Canada. So we're actually in the middle of an expansion right now. But the point is, for every new market we get into, we partner directly with the financial institutions. So what happens is that your funds are technically not we think about it. We just provide the technology. The actual fund is being held by an actual bank account on the back end, like an actual bank. So in certain countries who are more tech inclined, we find it a lot more easier because they understand the concepts, because it's still relatively new. But for certain countries, it could be a thing of either a monopoly on the banking infrastructure where they're just more rigid to open it up, or maybe it's a thing of knowledge. Uh, they're not too conversant with the whole process. So it goes from country to country. Some countries has been easier for us. Some countries have been a lot more challenging. But also there are third-party infrastructure players today, like a currency cloud, which is like a Visa product, where they could help to facilitate a lot of this. Like they already built a lot of the banking infrastructure and partnerships, and then they can help fintechs like ourselves to onboard and to sort of leverage what they've already built. So to answer your questions, it depends on jurisdictions. Some jurisdictions have made it tougher for fintechs to operate. Some jurisdictions actually welcome it.
Okay, so that always begs the question. You know how this works. How are the Canadian financial institutions? I mean, they've got a monopoly in Canada, five, six banks. How have they accepted you?
I think it's still a work in progress. It's still
Very diplomatic, Osamede.
a work in progress. Yeah, because we still need them. They are our big brothers and sisters, if you may. But we do need them. But there is a long way. I wouldn't even say a long way. I think right now I'm seeing a lot of write-ups about open banking. I think the Canadian system are looking to open up a lot more. I spoke to one of the bank executives for one of the big banks in Canada last week, and he was actually hired in from San Francisco to help the bank to understand more of this fintech aspect and try to help steer the bank and help them in sort of that process. But in Canada, there's not a lot of big banks that are open to the idea in terms of working with fintechs and building banking infrastructure as a service. Not a lot of them. There's a handful, maybe DCB Bank, People's Trust, Equitable Bank, ATB in Alberta. That's really about it. The big banks, let's just say it's not one of their priorities today.
Well, it's going to be one of their priorities because they're going to be forced into open banking. And one of the things that comes up through open banking has been in the past Bitcoin. And on your website, I see mention of Bitcoin and blockchain. That's going to be of concern to some users, isn't it?
Yes. So what happens is that in certain markets, we don't actually even offer it. So markets like Canada, we don't even offer. We are registered with the FinTrack, but we don't even offer cryptocurrencies at all. So it's not even available to those users. Certain other jurisdictions where the government's a lot more open-minded. So say for example, like a Rwanda, then we talk about it a little bit more. But the idea is that we believe strongly that the concept of currency in this next 5 years, for example, or over the next decade, is going to transcend just government issued currency, that there is a place for digital blockchain based currency. It's one of those things I think that is inevitable. So the sooner we start to prepare our systems for a world that has both blockchain based currencies and government issued currencies working together, I think the more prepared we are going to be for the future. So we do, in certain jurisdictions, support users who also want to have digital wallets or cryptocurrency-based wallets.
Right. And you'll provide the blockchain backing to those efforts, right?
Yes, yes. So today we work with a company called Fireblocks. They're one of the, definitely one of the best in the world. So they work with us in terms of custody of these assets today. So yes, we do work with the best of the best to help provide these wallet infrastructure.
What about
remember our goal? Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So I was just going to say our goal as an infrastructure is to provide you a wallet solution where you as a user have that freedom with money. You have that international borderless freedom with your money. That's pretty much our goal. And if we think in certain jurisdiction, they are ready for the cryptocurrency narrative as a type of, I don't want to say money per se, but financial product, then in those markets, we want to be able to serve those users as well.
Okay. So who are your competitors? I have a daughter that's going to school in England right now, and I tried to move money to England, and do the currency exchange and all that kind of jazz. And while there were a lot in the UK to do that, 2 or 3 websites, here in Canada, that was not easy to do. So who are your competitors, do you think, here? And I guess the other question is, what currencies are you currently dealing in?
Okay, so our competitors, it all depends on the jurisdiction. So the big ones would be Revolut, TransferWise, MoneyGram, Remitly. Those are the big ones, and those are competitors. But where we differ from them is a lot of them don't quite have the infrastructure working exactly well in Africa. So like I said, I've been traveling across the continent right now for our own efforts. And for example, in a market like Zambia, the big players, they're not here. I mean, they are here, but they are working with third parties. And one of the challenges, for example, in this market is if you try to send money using like a World Remit today, right? You can't pay into a bank account. They are connected to the mobile money operators. So in Canada, version of a Rogers. So they have like MTN here, Airtel. So they are connected to the mobile money. But the thing is that with the mobile money, the limits are very low. So it's about $1,000 or less. So if you wanted to do a $5,000 transaction, you would have to do a 5 times transaction, and that means fees every single time. And then when the money gets to your mobile money, if you wanted to move it to your bank account, that's another fee. So at the end of the day, you could see that you could lose as much as 10% in fees. So that's where we are coming to say, no, we are building an actual infrastructure directly with these banks, so that way we're giving our users more options. You want to pay to, for example, your daughter, if your daughter, for example, let's say she was in Kenya, you want to pay directly to her bank account, it will go directly to her bank account. You could send the whole transaction in one tranche, so it's less fees, right? So that's one of the beauty with us, is that we are on ground looking to build more in-depth infrastructure. So in terms of competition is there, but these are some of the places we differ. Then in certain markets show up, like in Nigeria, for example. I think in Canada, the only real competition I would say would be a company called Lemonade Finance. They're out of YC Combinator, sort of another accelerator program, and they are probably the number one player, I would say, for that peer-to-peer wallet style payment cross-border between Canada and Nigeria. Because again, we used to have Remitly in that market, but they couldn't quite, Africa is still, it's a growing market. It's a lot of challenges, and it takes a certain level of local knowledge to be able to truly navigate the market. So I think a lot of the bigger companies have found it hard to sustain that growth and to deal with the regulators locally. So they've just decided to work with third parties. So that's sort of like in terms of the landscape, our competition, and how we come in to be able to bridge this gap.
Okay. So I want you to pull out your crystal ball. Where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? As one of the biggest financial institutions in Africa, for instance?
So in 5 years' time, we see ourselves as the go-to platform for the African immigrant or the African entrepreneur who carries out global payment, so global transactions. It could even be the traveler, the father who has a kid in Canada going to university and wants to be able to pay that tuition fee, right? The inconvenience today of having to first get a dollar, do a wire, we're saying no, we could bridge that. The father should be able to just onboard, just like a normal bank transfer, do a bank transfer on his app and pay directly to university right on the app. Don't have to worry about currency conversion or simple in 5 minutes or less, right? So it goes from, like I said, the father who wants to send money to his kid or the business professional in Canada who wants to send money back home. Because remember, this money they're sending back home is more than just money. For a lot of family, it is hope for the future. We want to be able to help to facilitate that. Or the e-commerce business person who imports goods from a supplier in China, but they need that to be able to build and expand their business locally, say in Kenya or Rwanda. We want to be able to facilitate that. So we see ourselves as the go-to payment solution for the individual or business that carries out cross-border transactions.
Osamede, I wish you continued success.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Osamede Arhumnwunde is the co-founder and CEO of GIGX Technologies.